Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the ASEA Redox Healthcare Professional Series. It's February the 19th, and I've got a great guest this morning, Jerry White. My name, for those of you who are watching this recording or don't know who I am, I'm Dr. Dick Walker from Spokane, Washington. I've been active in ASEA for about 9 years, serve on the medical professional board, as does Jerry. And we just are really wanting to get more information out there to those of you who are healthcare professionals, either looking at this as something that you might want to engage in or already engaged in it and just wanting to know more about some of the other healthcare professionals that are involved. And I want to introduce Jerry. I'm going to let Jerry tell you who he is and what he does, but I want to introduce Jerry as a very important person in my life because many years ago, he was really the first medical professional who started to open my eyes and my mind to alternative things. I happened to have a problem that Western medicine really wasn't taking care of. And even though I have a degree in preventive medicine as well as internal medicine and emergency medicine, I wasn't able to get resolution of that. But using some interesting technology outside of ASEA, we won't be talking about that this morning, but he was able to open my mind to the fact that there are other things in addition to standard medical dogma, protocols, et cetera, that can really make a difference in people's lives and in their health. And quite frankly, he also opened my mind to the fact that there are different ways to earn a living utilizing the expertise that you have as a healthcare professional and to really create a lifestyle with a bit more freedom of choice and a bit more ability to spend time with your friends and family and not spend all of that time at the hospital. And when I first met Jerry, he was working at the Shriners Hospital here in town, very actively engaged in helping some very compromised young people who were starting out their life already with problems. And Jerry was very integral in helping a number of those. So Jerry, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you've done professionally, and then we'll kind of go through a series of questions here to kind of bring out your involvement in ASEA and why you see that as being so important.
Great. Good morning. I'm very excited to be with Dick and Nancy. After all these years, we've grown to be building such empires that we don't get enough time to each other. And it's terrific. My original soiree into really understanding human physiology came from being an athlete, 4-year All-American in college in swimming and coaching, where we're really looking to try to help people, my athletes, find their potential and move into some new areas that I got a chance to experience, really pushing for excellence, going far beyond what I ever could have imagined in my day-to-day life through some coaching and mentorship. And I wanted to pass that along. There was also this sense of what's possible. And you cross these thresholds and you want to go back and you want to teach people what it's like to really lay it on the line, sacrifice over time and gain something. So became quite successful at a coaching level in swimming and then later in triathlons. But even with successes that have in numbers of kids at the Olympic trials and that sort of thing, and my wife was actually my assistant coach at the time and said, if you want to, if you want to have anything happen between us, then you have to make more than $800 a month. And recommended that I go up to this hospital, and they had put in a number of new swimming pools. It was a novel new idea. This was back in almost the mid 80s, and got an opportunity to start up the idea of rehab. Instead of working with these incredibly fit people that were putting in massive numbers of hours of training and looking at that kind of physiology, I saw that people at every walk of life had these difficulties and got a chance to go into physical therapy. Through that, I've always been someone who's fascinated with what's possible, not necessarily sticking with what we always knew. And so chasing rainbows and learning things and filling up, that was really a piece of it. So I got recruited over to the Shriners Hospital, where it was just amazing to see a place that provided free healthcare for kids just because they had some extra time. They put together some fundraising and they did it just for that. Just a bunch of old guys that just loved kids. And it was an open opportunity to explore some things that I had not ever even imagined existed. And got the bug in the laboratory. It was a create a laboratory that there were only two of in the world. They were called a gait analysis lab, and we wanted to expand a little bit and go into human performance at the same time. Around the same time, got exposed to the fact that there were parts and functions that the human body has that were beyond explanation, that we could train people and they could gain these developments, or we could take somebody who's compromised in their immune system or compromised in their nervous system and work around it. It was a fascination to watch the body build itself better than it was, no matter where they started. And so through that process, sometimes I just say I got a chance to work with the fittest of the fit and the sickest of the sick. And through it, we got introduced to the use of energy in the form of things like magnetic fields and infrared light, and it was a fascinating world to look into. I was discovering some things about people who had what's called phantom limb pain, where they had an amputation, didn't have the limb anymore, but they had a lot of discomfort, or they had sensations of their hand opening or closing or moving, and they were modified by these magnetic fields. It was fascinating. So Dr. Walker and I got together in a very unusual way. You notice that our houses are built similarly. We're made out of logs. And I went in and I had been building, sometimes us curious ones, we go out and try some things. And I went to a log building course one time, and my wife and I had been writing down on pieces of paper all these different ways we wanted our log house to be someday. And so I went to a log building course, and of course it was 2 days, so I was a pro by then. And I decided to get with it, and I built a baby cradle in a box to learn some woodworking skills, and then I jumped right into building this house. Wrote it out on a piece of paper, sent it in, and started. But one of the things you have to do is to peel the logs. And there you got a big draw knife. It's got two handles on it, a big sharp blade. And I was, you'd think I'd be there doing the grizzly stuff, but I was literally stuffing it into a corner, and I cut my finger along the long edge, and I had a mess. And so I went to Dr. Walker's minor emergency clinic that he was operating, and he was the guy on, and I'm kind of got this dangly finger here, and he put it back together. He asked me what it was about, and I said, a draw knife. He goes, I know what a draw knife's for. I want to build one of those too. And so, gosh, a full year later, he and Nancy drove out to see the place. And that was the beginning of, I think we're probably close to almost 30 years of working together and saying, let's not go with, I just had this thought this morning, where in this institutional setting, although it was fascinating to look at these neurologic problems that led to orthopedic problems, and my lab was set up to do predictive outcomes. So they'd say, well, here's all these unique characteristics of this poor kid, but the adaptability of a human being is that they've come up with this gait pattern or this way of moving. What if we did this, or what if we did that? What would the outcome be? And so that was really what the lab was about. And yet it got to the point where I was stuck between the lines. It was we were trying to find all this exciting new science out there, and the system couldn't keep up. So they eventually said, you know what, let's just gather data, and someday we'll figure out how to use it. I was going, no. We got the ability to do it right now. So stuck between the lines. And then I meet this adventurer and his wife, Dr. Walker, who comes careening off the mountainside and breaks everything from top to bottom. And that's why he was hurting so bad. And we just had this kinship that said, let's explore what's possible and not get stuck between the lines, but maybe live a life above the line and becoming something more than what we've. And so our collaboration from the very beginning fit that criteria. Through that process, eventually we learned to start building some sort of a business on the side. And it was freelance. I mean, it's crazy. You just get a chance to do this networking stuff and kind of rewrite some of the rules yourself and build what your life wants. So we did that for years, and it was an amazing experience, and the growth we had together and the people we began to become. But it started to drain out because the leadership lost its focus, and then along came ASEA, and ASEA came through a couple of housewives, Trish Winkler and Denny Robinson, who had gone to an event down in Salt Lake City. They were exceptional marketers in their own right, and were recruited by this company that was, you talk about going into the stratosphere in terms of the new possibilities in science. And it was called ASEA. They called me up right from the very get-go and said, this is a big deal, but yet we're not really sure. Can you come down as a researcher, as a scientist, and take a look? And it was the most mind-opening thing I had ever really experienced, talking to some people that you talk about flying at the edge of the envelope, creating something bigger and better on purpose, mentorship, but then the science was just insane. So it started playing and tickling in the back of my mind. But our collaboration and our other effort just kept draining out, and it just wasn't able to pay for itself. And so I guess when that happens, you got to get back to the realities of going back and slogging. But then we got the vision, and we can talk about that a little bit. But I went to the Walkers. It was like almost minutes after I discovered this, because when you have fellow adventurers, somebody that you really can go out and challenge the big stuff together with, those are the first people you talk to. And that's how we collaborated to start this journey called ASEA.
Yeah, it really did happen that way, because we had been all excited with that other venture, working with EMF and some other really cool things, infrared, and then we had started to build a lifestyle around having the freedom of not having to be at the hospital, me not having to be at the hospital so much. And then boom, the rug kind of dropped out from underneath us. And then I remember telling you, Jerry, I'm just going to go back to work. I'm going to go back to 60, 70 hours a week, making a lot of money, practicing Western medicine. Maybe you could go out and find something else, find the next coolest thing in the cutting edge of alternative functional ways to help people get better. And when you find something, come back and let me know. And now back to you, because I think I was the first or second person that when you got back from Salt Lake, because you drug me down there a couple of weeks later. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's kind of it. This experience, if you're an adventurer, if your life says find new frontiers, live to the edge of the envelope, live to a higher standard, and your heart and your soul wants to do that, it turns out that a lot of institutional situations don't allow it. Oftentimes, what I found in my family was that whatever we came up with, somebody else owned. Whenever we wanted to continue to expand and develop into what we could see as a vision in our own lives, it was locked. And it was locked by sort of opinions of, we began to learn as we worked together in this process that if we can see it, we can believe it, we can achieve it. And there are certain aspects to this idea of networking together that are taught from generation to generation to generation. And I remember going through a lot of postgraduate work, searching for that moment in time where they were going to teach us how to make a living. And through all the schooling I ever had, it was always frustrating to say, you know what, no one's ever taught us how to make a living. They taught us how to follow somebody else's rule and to kind of acquiesce and sit back. And I just, sorry guys, but us like mountaineers like Dr. Walker and Nancy and then us we're just not meant to fit in that mold. So trying to find a place to go back to, I had already let my license go. I was saying, okay, no, it's much more fun out here on the frontier and making a bigger difference. But I didn't really know where we're going to go. I kept trying to do CPR on a dying enterprise with the previous one, and along comes this set of housewives with this brand new idea. And so here's what we found. We found that the idea of cellular health, that each individual cell living on its own has its own requirements. It has to produce its own energy. It has to correct its own situations. It can actually adapt to a changing world in a fascinating way. It's a moment by moment, instantaneous adaptation. And when I went down to the headquarters and talked to Dr. Samuelson and the founders with the Virtus Norton, I thought, this really starts to fulfill a visionary piece of my life, is that I wanted a mentor. I wanted somebody to teach me to climb above where we currently were. And where was I at? At the time we got introduced to this, we were in pretty significant financial trouble. We were struggling to try to keep a hold of a dream. It was falling apart. And here we saw people that were able to rise well above what I was being taught. I wanted to follow the heart and vision of Virtus Norton. But then there was this Gary Samuelson guy that we got a chance to say, wow, this is a new discovery that we never even imagined. So here we looked at this cellular activity, and I was able to apply some of the things that I'd learned in the laboratory about how the body adapts. This adaptation thing is really kind of interesting. And from a rehab standpoint, as a physical therapist, what we're trying to do is to take somebody who's kind of the environment you live in, the life experiences have you had, maybe the difficulties you've had, have you led you to this sort of stasis or point where you're slowly draining. It's not really static, but it's kind of the same things over and over again, but getting worse. Aging is catching up with you, and knew that progressive physical exercise would cause those cells to be able to take in that information in some form or fashion that you're going to stress us here on a regular basis. But then the remarkable part was these cells could rebuild themselves stronger and better from an outside input. And so I started seeing all these things happening in my head with this new technology of saying we can now let them communicate within themselves and around themselves in ways that reminded them of how they used to work when they were young, and off we went. I mean, from there, it started filling in all the questions I ever had in terms of the mechanics and the physiology and the neurology, and answers they've been searching for a long time. So how could we resist? So we jumped in. We started playing the what if game with the Walkers and then the Lathams, and through that process, we've developed some of the biggest organizations in the country, and we're only just beginning. I feel like we're just putting in the concrete foundation.
Right. Can you remember back then? I know we were doing meetings once a week, and were there any kind of unbelievable experiences that you remember hearing about from people who were just getting started on it? Anything that sticks out for you? I know there were a couple for me, and I just couldn't believe them until I actually sat down with the people who had those experiences out in the hallway after the meeting, and really kind of grilled them, almost like I'd put my physician's hat on and taken a history, and it was like I would come away from talking to those people and saying something happened here that I don't know of any other way to facilitate other than this redox stuff. So what the heck is going on here? And I think I'm sure you had those same sorts of aha moments.
Well, one of the things that was very striking to me was, it was a little bit later, but it was just like, this isn't possible, but it just happened. I had a guy from across the street, and he had stumbling problems, and he was kind of really herky jerky, but I really liked the guy. He just couldn't work anymore, and his body just was unpredictable to him. And he came to one of our events, and it was right after the development of Renew 28. And when Renew 28 came out, we thought, well, how do you market something like this, and what does it really do? So we were putting on people's hands and saying, okay, I want to put on one hand part, have you put it on one hand, the back of your hand, and not the other. And we're going to try it a few minutes and see if you feel this sort of silky smooth difference. Or I don't know. We were just experimenting. And this guy was sitting in the back of the room, and all of a sudden he starts kind of smacking the wall with the back of his hand. And then he was scratching his hand, and he raised his hand. He goes, can this stuff work on numbness? And I said, I'm looking to see if it feels silky smooth. What are you talking about? And he said, strangely enough, I've had these surgeries because of this problem. And one of them was that herky jerky motions. He fell down the stairs, and so he got a severe neck injury, and they did a surgery on him. And he said, my hand, the back of my hand for 10 years has been completely numb. And he says, I know the problem comes from my neck, because that's where the problem comes from. And then here I'm sitting here with this numbness in the back of my hand. And he says, I'll be doggone if that thing is, I'm beginning to feel it. I can scratch my fingers across it. And I'm going, well, excuse me, sir, but that's not possible. So we get to a little bit more, and we get into the meeting again. We're talking to somebody else, and he starts pushing the lady next to him, goes, feel this. And I'm going, what is the deal? And he goes, this is crazy. But he said, I now have the feeling back in the back of my hand. So I went to it was amazing to everybody in the room. And I went to his house the next day, and I asked him, were you like, do I need to pay you because you made the meeting better, or is that really real? He goes, not only is it real, but he says, I have this leg, I can't get it to go up the stairs. And he says, this morning, he said, after you gave it to me, I was drinking it. And he says, this morning I can lift this foot up. And he says, I could stand on it. He says, I got so excited about it. He says, I poured this stuff on my breakfast this morning. So it's those spontaneous things that just come out of left field that you just don't get, that kind of give you that stimulus to go a little bit farther. And there's been thousands of those kinds of things. And here we are today.
I know what you
threshold of another new leap forward.
Yeah. Now we have realredoxresults.com with hundreds of little short video vignettes of those sorts of experiences that, gosh, if you have a down day and you're wondering if this works, just go watch a couple of those, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. So what do you think is the most important thing for, let's say there's a healthcare practitioner of some variety watching this morning? What do you think is maybe the number one takeaway for them? Well, I'll ask you for two of them. Number one is with the technology, and number two is lifestyle. Because I know you and I at one point in time were just, we were just worker bees. We were just putting in lots of hours. We were doing it because we, not just for the financial thing, but because we enjoyed helping people. But What would be a good takeaway for them?
Yeah, definitely. Those are great questions. And the first one, in terms of the physiology, in terms of the outcomes, in terms of what, think of it in this logic standpoint. It's often been said that we've never been able to create a machine that can heal itself, but the body does it. It's like a farmer can plant the seed, and we think in our big uppityness is all the things that we can do in our lives and in the world. We could go out there maybe and pull up the seed every day and stretch it a little bit, maybe put a slurry in there and stick it back in. And that's what causes this thing to grow, that we're really supposed to build it. But no, there's this beyond our comprehension, radical, amazing capability for the cells to do what they were built to do in the first place. And it strikes me now that we have this understanding that the communication that's required is overwhelmingly interesting. But bottom line, from a day-to-day clinical practice standpoint, ultimately the body has to heal itself. And so if we take a different tack and we say, if it has to heal itself and it's not healing itself, and we have a kind of a corner on the industry of providing it with what it's missing to prevent it from healing itself, moment by moment, step by step, every single start and stop of reactions and requests for certain byproducts and the development of change and turning on the genetic pathways and opening up the observation of the surrounding environment. If we have the keys to that kingdom, it's like the ultimate power. You turn the switch and step back and watch amazing happen. Well, that is really what we're on the threshold for, is to, and you know what, that whole idea of going into medicine with the Hippocratic oath, it says, above all, do no harm, but also it's much better to not just give a man a fish, but teach him how to fish. And if you can teach that body system to remember, it already knew how to do that. This is the greatest horizon I can possibly imagine. The upside is that we've got little techniques where you can prove it to yourself. I did it 41 times in a row in the Dominican Republic, and I don't speak Spanish, where we could say to people, go through a movement pattern, or I'll challenge something in your how guarded you are, how flexible your body is, or how you're using your reflex responses. And then I'm going to apply the Renewed 28 or we were doing the liquid at the time, and spray it on their tongue or drink it. And then say, now let's try it again. 41 times in a row, not understanding the language in about 24 or 30, about 30 hours. People had this radical experience of saying, it's sort of like, I'm in control again, in control of maybe their balance or their strength or their capability or their discomfort. It's like my body has taken control again. And it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking. So to watch that from a clinical standpoint and to be able to use that becomes a tool to guide us to what may be wrong. Use that and learn that, and you will be a tremendously better practitioner. You will be known as a better practitioner to the people around you. You will have a practice where people will throng to you because you can help them fix themselves, and the word will get out. It's pretty remarkable. The second part about this lifestyle, my son came to me at 9 years old, a real sensitive guy, and I love him to death. But he said, "Dad,"
he's now 6'2" and
no, 6'5.5".
Wow.
and he says,
he was a cute. We loved him. He was a cute kid. You tell him.
Yeah, great kid. And he says, "Dad, he's one of those guys that was just immensely patient." And so he would set the baseball glove on the counter and sit back and wait and hope. And he would be the same kind of guy that he always wanted a dog. And on my screensaver on my computer, every week he'd put a different dog. And just as a reminder, and not really trying to press the issue, but one day he came to me with tears in his eyes and said, "Dad, why is it that you can go to that hospital and play with everybody else's kids, and if you ever come home, there's no time for us?" And, you can fall in love with these kids. But there was a lack of an understanding of how to get done with the economic side of life efficiently enough and sufficiently enough to be able to turn back to the things that mattered most. And what we began to learn was we worked together on that first project, and even more so when we got to ASEA, was that there are ways that we can gather together to do the things in our own hearts that really matter, that we can say, here's our purpose to get better. Our purpose is to be better citizens, better parents, better husbands, and better at our craft, better mentors. And what better way to live life than to have that ethos of becoming better? And with the secondary thing in mind, that I wanted a mentor so badly that I began to realize over time, there's generations now that require mentors much more than has ever been. And if we don't learn to be the mentors of the next generation, we're lost. And right. So there's a reason for me to have been mentored, was to have that exciting moment where you could turn around and mentor others, and to be able to help people to go through shared human experience. Our experiences, just as we never got to do the big adventures like you were doing when you were young, and I was doing ridiculous amounts of training and climbing the mountains, really, emotionally, and searching for those areas of potential where we could maximize them. But to grow together with people on that track, you become the average of the 5 people you hang around the most. And we started to get this chance to hang around with incredible people. And some of the most inspirational people to me were those little kids who were dealt a pretty rough hand. Their lives, it wasn't their choice. And I remember thinking that this industry would give people the opportunity, even those guys, where maybe the only motor function that they could control was the sparkle in their eyes, and maybe the ability to move their head just enough to operate a wheelchair and drive around a little bit. But what if Dr. Walker and I were saying, this kid's got, it's just you can feel it. They've got so much to offer, but it's inside of them. I guess that's a metaphor for all of us. Yeah. And the system kind of holds them in, or the life in general. What if we were to say, for example, let's take those kids and they got we'll make a little platform on the front of their chair, stuff I did on a daily basis. So they could flip a switch and up would pop this. This is back in the old days. You guys have to remember a CD in a little package, and maybe a little sign that says, I'm building my own business. And it's to teach all of us to be better. And I'd be honored if you would take this and consider being a part of what I do. We could light up the world. That person could make an inspiration beyond generations. And if they could do it, what is it in each one of us that we could do to inspire people to climb up, to become what you can become, and get paid for that?
Yeah, that really fits in with the motto that the company has really adopted, and that is "We power potential," and that's really what we're talking about. We power the potential in people to get better physically, the potential for people to thrive financially, the potential for people to create a lifestyle that maybe they've wanted to create and haven't been able to. I know that you created a lot more time with your family and kids, and I was able to do the same thing. Luckily, it wasn't too late. They were still they were a few years ahead of your kids, but they were still, a couple of them are still at home. And, it just is, this goes way beyond molecules and cells. And yet it all starts at molecules and cells. And so I think we're sort of running out of time unless you have any quick other.
I just want to thank everybody for being here, being a part of what this amazing adventure we get to go on, and the idea that we get to sort of get done with ourselves so we can turn around and give to stretch ourselves, to take those God-given gifts that we have and use them together for good. And the surprising part is the economics are staggering. To have this efficiency model with a cutting edge technology that nobody has in the world right now, that is radically needed more every day than it was the day before, that we keep finding new pieces. And that I know most of us went into medicine for some pretty altruistic reasons. And unfortunately, there are so many concrete walls that are about around you and one over the top of your ceiling. And if you're one who has to get out and go, if you're one who wants to get back to really living the life you were meant to live beyond the clinic, let's learn how to take that clinic and expand it so that it becomes a revenue generating proposition to the point where you can be all that you can be. So we left you with a lot of mysticism today about how the heck do you do that? And it really is about gathering together and solving problems. We live in a world today where we're being separated and people just learn from a small little box that learns from them, that says, if you're interested in this one thing, I'll give you more of that one thing. And we get narrower and narrower and narrower. The future to me in this game is that we're going to find out that when we get together with other people and we talk and we solve problems and we move forward, we find out that they're not the enemy. Why do people keep it's this system we're in. Let's break the system. Let's just go to this magnificent life of making a difference so that every day you could go, I didn't know I could work this hard. I'm completely exhausted. I'm running around making all kinds of just possibilities for people, but you got a big grin on your face and say, Lord, give me another day just like it. So let's do that.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Some great words of wisdom. I'm sure there are people here who this has really been an answer to many of their questions, and we'll come back and do this again sometime. But I appreciate your time, and have a great Saturday. I know you've got some things planned, and I'm sure that Marcia probably has a training plan for her triathloning, and that's been amazing to watch. And so. Love you, brother, and thank you for sharing your words of wisdom.